Hi there and welcome to OpenCorp's September 2021 webinar called Investor Spotlight, Real Property Success Stories. Over the last 18 months, as part of our OpenCorp webinar series, on a monthly basis, we've been sharing expert insights and interviewing market leaders around data and analytics and economics around what's going to happen in the property industry, the kind of data that they look at to inform their decisions, to be able to bring these top property experts of Australia into your living rooms virtually and give you as many insights as possible around their expert opinions on the property market. This month, we're featuring a couple of success stories, real stories from the trenches with OpenCorp clients. Both of them have built up thriving property portfolios. They're very open and transparent around their journey, their first-hand experiences, answering your questions and sharing insights that hopefully you'll find helpful about how they started and how they've built up the portfolios that they have. So who I'll be interviewing as part of this month's webinar are two couples, Simon and Sharon. They are a professional couple, both working full-time. They've been OpenCorp clients for a couple of years and built up a portfolio of multiple properties and seeing significant capital gain in a relatively short space of time. That's all through the COVID pandemic. They haven't had any vacancy, mitigating their risk, and over their journey, they've been able to introduce friends of their network to OpenCorp based on their experiences as well. Let's hear from Simon and Sharon. It's great to be talking with Simon and Sharon Bowker today, who are OpenCorp clients and friends of mine, and they have been clients for the last couple of years or so, going great guns with their portfolio. Thanks for joining us, Simon and Sharon. Great to have you along.
Thanks, Boz.
Thanks, Boz. Good to be here.
I thought the new puppy, given he's been keeping you up for the last couple of nights, might have got a gig today, but clearly not.
Banished downstairs.
Yeah, entertaining the children so we can get a bit of time to talk to you.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, let's get into it. Look, what we're trying to cover today is really just to understand a little bit about your journey and less around exactly what you've done and how many properties you've got, far more about the journey itself, how you felt about it, how that's maybe changed over time as well, because having done this for so long, guiding initially family and friends and then obviously as OpenCorp's grown, all of our clients, I have a saying that our clients need to bring the money and the motivation. We can do everything else. And so given that so much of this investment journey is really around having the right mindset, that was really what I was keen to understand from your perspective to kind of start with. So I guess, can you take us through what your investment journey looked like? What had you done before OpenCorp and had it gone well? Were there missteps? How were you feeling when we first came across each other's paths?
We were property owners, not property investors. Although, in some ways, it feels like everybody that owns a property sort of half thinks of themselves as an investor. We're all reading about prices all the time and constantly kind of in the back of our minds calling it an investment. So I think we were probably where most people are, that overexposed to conversations about property. We were lucky that we'd had a property in the UK. Well, we bought a property in the UK before we moved here nearly 8 years ago. And we sort of begged, borrowed and stealed enough to not sell before we bought. And that sort of getting ourselves into a position that we sort of became property investors because we rented out our old family home was the beginning of the journey. And then, we found ourselves in that sort of place where we actually don't really know what we're doing. The funny thing was at the beginning of our step in the Australian market to go, let's go and think about buying a property over here with the property that we had in the UK once we'd sold it and moved the money over. We started going and doing visits around properties in different suburbs, and it pretty quickly realised that we were just looking at places that we would live in and going, if we hadn't have moved here, we could have moved there, and that's nice. And you could really see the kids going to this, and then I think thankfully we were, smart enough to realise how stupid we were.
Very good. So I guess, look, it's I'm sure we had this conversation early days. We have it with a lot of clients that the biggest mistake you can make when it comes to investing is being emotional about what you invest in. What was the kind of light bulb moment for you guys where, as we went through the information and what an investment strategy is about to deliver an end outcome, was there a light bulb moment? And if so, what was that around?
I think for me it was probably the amount of information and the research and that went behind it and what you needed to do to be able to make a good decision. And given where we had come from, which was driving around Melbourne on a weekend trying to figure out should we buy this house, to actually what you guys offered, which was all of that behind that, realised that there's absolutely no way we could do this on our own or without investing huge amounts of time and developing that kind of expertise. So I think as we started to go through that, certainly from my perspective, the light bulb moment was that realisation that actually this is what it takes, perhaps, to be able to do this wisely and optimise your chance for success. So I think, where we came from versus what you guys showed me very clearly that perhaps there was a different way to do it.
And most importantly, I think, Sharon, a process. It doesn't matter whether it's 2019, 2021 or 2025, we're going to be following a process and a system to deliver a measured outcome. I know that you guys manage people and processes as part of what you do in your careers. I'm sure you have the processes to deliver end outcomes in a work environment. It's really no different where property investment's concerned. So even though you had that light bulb moment, though, I mean, we're still, we're not buying lollipops here. We're spending significant amounts of money on major investments. And it's great that they all give us, $35,000 pay rises in the form of extra rent and tax benefits that we don't see to cover those costs. But it's still a significant outlay. Everyone has, anxieties or nerves starting out generally. What were yours around specifically, and how did you overcome those?
You can talk to this as well, I think, because I think we after we met you and we were talking through some of this, there was definitely some concepts that we both sort of grasped at different ways and times in the first discussions. So I think to kind of go back and remind myself of the sort of understanding process was there's should I put this money into property question, yes, no, and should I also buy other things? And so we sort of went through that largely on our own before I reached out to you and sort of said, hey, what do you do? Because I seem to remember you mentioned property. What we didn't know at the time was we knew that there was this tax thing because everybody talks about it, but we didn't really fully grasp the economics of leveraged investments. And we actually had a similar conversation in the concept of investing in stocks and things as well. And there was a sort of a half penny drop with that, where we were like, oh, right, so we don't actually need to spend any cash on this investment. We just need to back it up and borrow. And then I think that for me was I'm quite sort of numbers focused in my job, and I was sort of, the concept landed pretty well. And then I'm like, I get it. And sort of, started to realize that the concept of a leverage investment for us was really going to be quite an opportunity. And then I think we sort of talked about it, and I think there was a degree of discomfort early on. I think it's fair to say, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it took a little while to get my head around the concept of debt being an asset rather than a liability, and how to use that to sort of grow your wealth in that way. So that was the shift that needed to happen. But once you get it,
I remember you saying, well, when do we pay it off?
Yeah.
Like, well,
and what's the exit strategy? And, how does that all work out? So it takes a little while. That was quite a different way of thinking. When you go from buying a house personally with a mortgage, and the idea is that you pay your mortgage and then it's gone at some point in time, rather than accumulating debt over time, but in a slightly more purposeful way. So it took a bit of a shift to think about it differently.
Can we delve into that a bit, Sharon? Because it's without doubt the biggest concern that people have got is, how do I handle more debt? And I'm not speaking for you, but my experience over the journey is that where that comes from is that 90% of Australians only buy their own home, right? And even a higher percentage of our parents' generation only bought their own home, and even a higher percentage of their parents. So everything that's been kind of drilled into us over time is, debt's the devil and we've got to pay it off as quickly as possible. So it's a massive 180 mind shift to make. How did you kind of make that, or what were how did you overcome those concerns to realize how it could work to your advantage?
I think it's understanding the numbers and sort of those spreadsheets, and then also thinking about, and so my approach was, what's the worst case scenario? How can this go spectacularly wrong, and what would that look like? And when you sort of broke it down, worst case scenario actually wasn't that bad. It wasn't millions of dollars of debt that it was sort of the small amounts of debt at the very beginning, which is part of that deposit piece. So ultimately, from a risk assessment perspective, the risk that we were exposing ourselves to was actually much smaller than the debt of all the properties.
It's definitely a thing, though, isn't it? It's the parents' generation brainwashed me as much as, like, my grandparents were very conservative and they drilled it into my dad and auntie, and they were so proud of it at the kitchen table of, like, never overstretched ourselves, never did this, look at these crazy people in the 80s with the, all those people, look at all the mistakes, and you're like, you kind of subconsciously absorb it all. And then you came along and went, don't listen to them. It was like, okay.
Grandma with her cool mints is wrong. This is the new age way of doing it. Hopefully, it came with some whys and some valid reasons. But that's really good. I remember early days, you'd got some advice around finance structure, and we kind of turned that on its head to an extent as well, because the finance structuring part is really important, right? To be able to acquire multiple properties like you guys have done. Was there anything around the finance structure that was particularly eye-opening, or was a different way of thinking for you?
The piece that, we were sort of loosely heading down a path of doing it on our own. In that, we started looking at a property, and I don't know if we were that close, because I think we knew that we didn't really know what we were doing. So there was a point where we got some advice from a mortgage broker on how to restructure our loan in order to get a tax saving on our principal place of residence, because we were able to pay down a lot of the loan we had on this house when we brought money in. And so that advice was a little bit confused, to keep it simple. And so we were basically looking at the idea of, hey, we've got some money from selling a property in the UK. We've then paid down our loan on our principal place of residence. We're going to borrow that back, and then we're going to kind of go buy a house. And so there was a step of like, well, do you want to buy the house cash, or do you want to use it to borrow, which we quickly overcame with you giving us the sort of financial advice, in inverted commas, of like what the opportunity is to do in different ways, and go and seek proper advice on that, which we did. Then where we found that we were worried was, well, what happens if all these houses go south? And then you realize pretty quickly that the amount of deposit that you put in from your money, so to speak, and then leverage the rest, kind of allows you to create a sort of ring-fenced approach to, well, if it does go wrong, if the rental market completely collapses because of some financial cataclysmic event in Australia, which is highly unlikely to happen, but what would happen then? And you go, well, the worst case scenario really, at the end of the day, is we lose a chunk of our equity that we've taken out of our principal place of residence, and those places are, we've borrowed money against them, but they're independently financed through different companies that don't necessarily have any rights over the property we live in. So the Armageddon scenario is, are we going to ever lose the house we sleep and live in? And pretty quickly we went, well, we're in a pretty favourable position with how much we owe on this house and how much we're risking of this house. And so we go, yeah, I mean, God, if that's the absolute worst case, it just means, you got a few $100 a month in mortgage to pay that you weren't planning on paying extra. Like, that's a risk we're prepared to take.
Yeah. And so we haven't had financial Armageddon since you started, but we have had COVID, right? So, yeah, that happened not that long into your investment journey. So I guess how did, all the media uncertainty around that have you guys thinking about, well, is this our worst case scenario? And how did you get comfort in the kind of strategy that we'd employed?
I think I was wondering how on earth are we going to build these houses? Like if everyone suddenly, but construction didn't stop, thank goodness. But when it was all first starting to blow up, I'm like, we're just about to start to build a heap of houses simultaneously, and how's that going to happen? But that all turned out really well, which is a good thing. That was probably my main concern. And then once I realised that that wasn't going to be impacted, everything just happened.
Well, you always find yourself going, what's the catch? Because, when things actually go, well, hold on, this looks pretty clear, right? This looks like a really straightforward way of making money over the long term. There are points that come with greater risk, right? So the risk of not having renters in your property, and you start to think when something like COVID happens, you go, oh God, we might have 3 empty properties for a year because nobody can rent a house. Like, you just don't know, because it was so alien to us. And that literally coincided with lockdown, was when we were looking to put tenants in our first of the 3 consecutive properties. So from that perspective, there was it maybe took, the first one took the longest. It wasn't long, but it was like 3 weeks instead of 3 minutes. So it was like there was a 3-week window of us going, now we've got a bit of a conundrum. But like, it went in very, very short time. So that was a bit interesting. And that was probably the only moment where we went, is there a risk here from a COVID perspective? I think I was more looking at the other way around. I was going, at some point we may or may not decide to upscale our house we live in. And I'm having kind of done the maths over this investment journey and looking at the where we live journey and thinking, well, if there's a decline in prices, I'm not too worried about the investment journey, because we're at the beginning anyway, and over the long term that's not going to have an impact. I wasn't ever worried about the long-term impact on our portfolio. If we wait longer to get equity, so be it. In the short term, I'm thinking opportunistically, maybe we upgrade the house. And you'd remember I called you and said, what do you reckon? And you were like, nah, it's not going to happen. I was like, oh, I think it could. You were like, well, if you believe that, then fine. But, and in your very measured way, sort of let me go off in my head and think about whether I'm going to buy a bigger house in Brighton. But the reality was the property never really stalled for more than a couple of weeks, and it just took off. And we are where we are. As you can see, we haven't moved.
So we're recording this and you're telling me that I'm right.
Well, there is editing rights, right?
All good. So if we kind of go back to the start of the journey, you mentioned, Sharon, that you realised, mainly based on the research and the process, that it wasn't something that you could do as well yourself. Were there any other particular reasons why you chose to partner with OpenCorp as opposed to fly solo?
I think that's probably the most significant one, because with the expertise and all the research that comes behind it is the time and that it requires to do that, and the free time that I think either of us have to do that is pretty minimal. So it just wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, and I guess on a scale of 0 terrible to 10 amazing, you're only a couple of years into your journey. How would you kind of describe property performance and rental performance and peace of mind and all those kind of things that you were maybe nervous or anxious about at the start, or that you considered as risks? How's that played out over the last couple of years?
So it has played out pretty much exactly as how you said it would. Relief. It's only, as you say, it's only been a couple of years, but sort of each time where something's going to happen for the first time, we're like, all right then, let's see how this goes, and it goes exactly as you said it would. So it's been pretty straightforward and certainly no bumps in the roads.
Awesome. And thinking, you obviously got a couple of young kids. We're a similar age, so thinking kind of more medium to long term. How do you start to feel about what you've done in the last couple of years and what you'll continue to do moving forward in terms of what it means for the Bowker family's future?
Wow, that's a big question. I think
On a Friday afternoon.
yeah. I mean, we looked at it as we clearly hadn't, coming from the UK, there isn't such a good sort of long-term savings model built into, when you start earning. So and Sharon had gone to the UK and come back, so there's a different pension setup altogether. So we're not getting any younger. We arrived here, we got property that we were living in, but we hadn't got a lot else. So we're now in a position where thankfully we've made some quick adjustments, and we've got a couple of investments, not just property, I might add, that give us a pathway to, I think, making choices rather than being chained to the sort of kind of wage. Especially in the last year, you find yourselves becoming very philosophical about working versus living and spending time with people you love and things like that. So like we've always had the romantic ideas of retiring at 50 and doing this and doing that. So who knows what we'll actually want to do when we get to these points in the career. But I think when I was young and having not done any smart financial planning, and I'm talking like sort of post-university where I was just laden with debt and had no choice, all I have as a memory is some great times and some great fun, all dependent on a salary. And I had friends who were early doors, and you were pretty similar, that you'd made sensible savings and could go and travel overseas and do things like that. So I think in my head, it's just about, I want to be able to choose what I do and when I do it. And if I choose to carry on working, or I choose to work in a different job where I might earn less or work less or do something totally different, I think that's an incredibly empowering thing about accumulating wealth, really, at the end of the day. And I think I feel like I'm almost gone full circle to the point where I'm just chewing people's ear off with that view all the time and boring the pants off people about it actually is where you want to get to, because otherwise you're just running the race.
I would have, if only your grandma's there, and we could have seen that discussion over the dinner table going back the other way now. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Sharon, or not?
No, I think it's pretty similar, isn't it? It's about, I think one of the great things about this is the set and forget piece, which I'm a big fan of. And once you make those decisions and do that initial establishment piece, it's there in the background and life goes on, and it's just sort of happening without you having to think about it or actively engage with it as much or as little as you want to throughout the process. But knowing that, I guess the most important bit is the decision making bit at the start, and then it just happens as life carries on.
Your team is, I mean, this is not teed up shameless plug. Your team does an exceptional job of making it easy, and I think we're the ultimately best suited to that model kind of people. Like we just don't have the, I mean, I'm sure we could find the time, but we're not very good at finding time to manage stuff. And people talk to me about self-managed super and wanting to choose their own stocks, and for an hour a year I might look at the stock market and start researching companies. I just don't have the energy or time to spend that much time doing something. So when we worked through this process, and we were just talking earlier before we set up for this, like so much stuff has happened that if you do it on your own, like we would have just tripped over ourselves, because I struggled to pay the broadband bill on time. So the fact that we've got all of this sort of administrative support and done in such a sort of seamless and well managed way, I mean, it's just incredible, and it far exceeded our expectations of what your teams provide, and genuinely we were really impressed at every level. Like everyone at every different part of the service that you provide in the journey was just been incredible. So that works really well for us, and if that's helpful to other people that you're working with to understand, then I'm the first to tell people, and as you know, I've already shared that with a few people that we've spoken to. So yeah, that's brilliant.
Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate that, and the team will be rapt to watch it, because you're right, they take a lot of pride in it. Yeah, was there anything that surprised you, or anything that if you could have done it differently, that you would have?
I think the only regret on what would you do differently would be like you'd start earlier, right? I mean, it's the most coined phrase, and if you read any kind of financial investment kind of advice, it's like you start talking about compound interest and all the things that make this model work. You go, oh yeah, did this 10 years ago, we'd already been in a position of choice. So, but yeah, we're happy where we are.
Yeah, indeed. And I remember, a conversation we had fairly early on when we were talking. You're talking about some of these other properties that you'd driven around and seen on the weekend, and we started to look at cash flows and how much asset you could hold with our model, plus the compounding, compared to so much more money out of your pocket and less compounding. When the emotion or the location bias, if you want to call it that, comes into play. It's a really big emphasis on why the process is.
I struggled with that. Sorry to interrupt, but I struggled with the location bias. I didn't know it was called that. But like that was hard. That was probably the hardest thing. I'm like, I don't know if I want to buy a house there, and it was that conversation that was like, yeah, but you can buy a house down the road, but it'll be the only house you buy for the next 20 years, and therefore this is how much you can earn. I mean, that was probably the obstacle you had to overcome to explain it to me, I think.
And was it anything other than what you just explained in terms of how you overcame it? Because it is a really common thing that we hear. Was it purely a financial thing where the kind of light bulb went on and you said, right, we're going to do this versus this, or were there other parts to that?
I think, so everybody talks about property in life. So if you sit down and have a chat with, Joe Friend, Joe Friend's going to say, this suburb's going to grow this much, and then you're buying a property in this suburb over here, and you're going, okay, well, why am I buying in a suburb that somebody else thinks is not going to perform as well? And that may be true, but the reality is that the rental yield and the ability to hold a portfolio of a certain size to get compound on a bigger number is dramatically impacted. And so I think that was the bit where, and I don't think I'm totally over it. You kind of like, so you want to sit with your Monopoly cards and go, well, I got a property here, a property there, and it'd be really nice to say I've got some ocean frontage and I've got a couple of places up in Sunshine Beach, and and that's my portfolio, and great, that sounds wonderful. But the reality is I'd never be able to afford a portfolio that looks like that. And secondly, you wouldn't have the same economics behind it. So yeah, I think that's the bit that you've got to get over to get into the mindset of this is a set and forget investment, but it's done in a way that leverages all the pieces we just discussed.
Yeah, some expensive bragging rights, that's for sure.
Who knows? Maybe one day we have.
Indeed, absolutely. That's the whole reason we invest, right? It's to create what we want. So, absolutely. Look, the last question I've got for you, and I think you were starting to kind of go there just before, was you guys were new investors not that long ago. What's some advice or some guidance or encouragement that you'd give to people out there that have maybe been thinking about it for a while but haven't managed to kind of take that leap of faith and get started? What kind of advice could you give to them?
You go first.
I think I don't know. I think you just need to invest the time to understand it and the model, and work out whether or not it fits with you. But if it makes sense, then just go for it. I think once you sort of push through, or once we sort of push through that initial piece, then suddenly, as we said, it felt like time is of the essence, and why wait?
Yeah. Same, I think. I think it's the sort of analysis paralysis sort of thing that you all go through, isn't it? When you make big investments and big purchases, you sometimes maybe we're a little bit flippant. I mean, we certainly made some, I wouldn't say flippant investments, but we certainly made some flippant purchases of reasonably expensive things, and perhaps they weren't as well thought out as others. But you kind of. You can look at the what ifs and all of the above for as long as you like, but in the end, it's I wouldn't say getting on the ladder. It's deciding how you're going to go and build a portfolio of any kind of asset and getting on with it. I'm sure some of what we do won't go as well as others, and whether that's property versus this or that, or whether that's parts of the portfolio, I'm sure there'll be a bit of both everywhere. But in the end, if we'd have started 5 years earlier, we'd be 5 years further along, and we haven't. So it's just the way we are.
Guys, that's some great advice. Definitely take the play the long game, mitigate your risk along the journey, and take time to understand and apply it, and just jump in. I know that was exactly my experience a long time ago now, 18 years ago. I was 25, and I said exactly the same thing, Sharon. I said to myself, what's the worst thing that can happen here? If I hadn't taken that leap of faith, that property, couldn't have bought it better with a crystal ball in terms of market timing, and it was up about 75% inside the first 3 years. And I was off and running in terms of being able to grow my portfolio. So, Simon and Sharon, thanks so much for taking some time to sit down. Been a pleasure talking to you as always, and thanks for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Some amazing insights, I'm sure you'll agree, from Simon and Sharon. Now, we're going to talk to Talar and Michael. They are some of my favourite clients. They're full of passion and enthusiasm for property investing. They're definitely a good fit for OpenCorp and how we look at investing as well. Their lives are super busy. Talar's a physio, Michael's a sparky working on large-scale commercial sites in construction. They've got 4 kids, and they've been teaching their kids around their property investment journey and financial literacy for as long as I can remember. They've been OpenCorp clients for 3 years with multiple properties, and sharing our passion for property investing, they've introduced multiple clients to OpenCorp over their journey to help their family and friends to be able to take advantage of the same kind of results that we've been able to achieve for them. So sit back, enjoy the interview with Michael and Talar. Well, it's really exciting for us because we're here with OpenCorp clients and property investment aficionados, Talar and Michael Wadeson. You guys obviously started your journey before you came to OpenCorp, but we love talking to you because you share our passion for property investment and helping people understand what you've done and some of the insights that you've learned over your journey. So thanks for joining us. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Cool. So probably the best place to start. Can you maybe take our viewers through your property investment journey, and specifically how did you get started, and how did you feel when you were taking that first step? Because it's not always an easy one to do.
Yeah.
Well, Mike's journey actually started before mine.
Yeah, I probably when I was 21. I was keen. I've had a few friends who were buying property, buying houses, and we around the time it was early 2000s, and prices started to go up really quickly, and we could all, those who were wise enough to look around, could actually see it going up. So we decided looked around. We had some friends staying who were living down in Warrnambool, country seaside town, and found a place that was affordable. Looked around for 2 weekends, and I put an offer on a place. And that was the start. Yeah, bought a place with a big block down in Warrnambool. That was I was 21.
And then we actually bought our first property together when we were about 23, 24, and that was a schmozzle.
Yeah.
we were actually looking at buying a place together just as a rental property, and around the time that we were looking. And this sounds really ridiculous, but there was a door-to-door salesman that had rocked up at our door and had an offer. And we were just like, young and naive. You're like, oh my God, we've been looking at property. Why not go for it without actually putting any research or anything like that? The builders ended up being dodgy. We had tenants move in, and then they moved out because the meters weren't hooked up. So I don't know how they got certificate of occupancy, but they had to move out because the meters weren't hooked up, and it was just one nightmare after another. And we held on to it for a couple of years, but it wasn't worth it anymore, and we actually lost a bit of money on it, but we sort of gave that up.
It was a steep learning curve.
A very steep learning curve.
Good.
Don't buy a house through door-to-door salespeople, and do research.
Couple of good takeaway points there, which I'm sure we can explore as we go for sure. So, if we think about starting at the start, the challenge that a lot of people have in terms of my experience talking to them is because it's something new, it can be quite scary or daunting. They can be anxious about it. Given that you kind of started so young, it sounds like it was kind of, footloose and fancy free. I will buy a property, and that sounds like a good idea.
Exciting.
That's the way it was.
It was exciting.
So maybe if we think about the negative experience that you've had, how did you then kind of come full circle mindset wise to get back in the game and and be able to take that next step and move forward from the negative experience early on?
Well, it was difficult in the beginning. Like when we sold that place, we're like, we're never buying off the plan ever again. And then we had our children, so that was pre-children obviously, and then we had our 4 kids, and we're just like, let's just think about paying off our own house, and we won't bother about the investing. Once we've paid off our own house, we'll look into it again. So one day a guy came onto Michael's job site and was saying that, construction workers are some of the highest paid, but they've got nothing to show for it. So Mike came home and started talking to me about it, and I was a bit hesitant because we had 4 kids. I was still on maternity leave, so he was the only one that was earning money. And he's like, well, if we don't do something now, if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to be in the rat race forever. We're never going to get out of it. We've got to do something different. We've done it before. We know not to make the same mistakes. Why don't we give it a go? So we had him come out and have a chat to us, and
we tried to educate ourselves as much as this time did things a bit differently. Tried to educate ourselves as much as possible, so we take down some of that risk, reduce some of that risk. Yeah, that's it.
So, and we've always been good with money. It was just some of those hesitations. So we actually ended up buying for him, and we've still got that property. That is an apartment in Northcote. We probably wouldn't go apartments again, so that's another thing that we've learnt, even though we've held on to this property, just because of body corporate fees and all the rest of it. We probably wouldn't go down that path again. Yeah. But and then a couple of years after that,
so Michael. With that place, like the body corporate, but with those who have. Like the body corporates, you're paying for someone else to use the lift, you're paying someone else. I never knew anything about a car stacker, but this place has got a car stacker. And every time it breaks down and a serviceman comes out to fix it, it's we're the ones that have to pay for it. So it's his learning curve.
Yeah, a learning curve. But and then a couple of years later, Michael is constantly looking at, improving our financial literacy, if you want to call it. He listens to podcasts and things, and he came across my 4-year-old, The Property Investor. Yeah. So he bought the book, and we both read the book, and
it's a couple of workout of the days from Open Corp. Yeah. And that led me through to there.
So then we got in touch with Open Corp because they shared a lot of the same philosophies and stuff that we did, and it sort of snowballed on from there.
Yeah, cool. What were the things that you heard and you read from the WODs and from Cam's book that kind of helped you understand or I guess give you the confidence to kind of take that next leap of faith and overcome the things that you'd learned? Let's call them the mistakes, the things that you'd learned in the past. Was there anything specific, or was it you can't pinpoint it down to one thing?
Yeah, Cam's book obviously simplifies everything. Simplifies it, makes it easy to understand, and he's like a straight line to wealth. Just step. That makes it, it's basic. Makes it really easy to progress as opposed to getting lost in the world. It's easy to, make a wrong decision somewhere and then just keep on going.
The simplified explanations of it, and just also that. It's not a quick money-making scheme. You've got to be in it for the long haul, which we've always known. So the property's always like for the long haul. And, some people go, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, do shares and all the rest of it. So we did the shares for a little while, but we didn't understand shares. So that didn't really work for us, whereas we kind of understand how property works. And so it appealed to us a little bit more. But it was, as Mike said, more that the fact that he just simplifies the process so much that it's not really that difficult.
One of the things I love about you two is the sense of teamwork as a couple. you know, and that's not how everyone rolls, and that's perfectly okay. Like if I was doing this with my wife, she'd say, yeah, I read Cam's book in a week and it made sense to me, and then yeah, you do it, right? And everyone's different, and I love the fact that you kind of answer everything together because you're on the journey together, and I think that's really important. In terms of your journey, was there ever a time where one of you was more motivated than the other, you know, to move forward, or have you always been kind of completely aligned? And if so, what's allowed you to be completely aligned across your whole journey? Because that's a really unique thing to have, right? It's
Yeah, I've probably been a little bit more hesitant at times. Like I think particularly with the first property that we bought this second time round sort of thing, the apartment in Northcote, I was a bit more hesitant just because of the situation that we're in and thinking about our past and not wanting to make those mistakes. But once we made that sort of leap and we're like, well, we want a better future for our children. We don't want to be working until we're 70 years old. Like, you know, we want to enjoy life with our kids and we don't want to sort of be tied down to that kind of stuff. So although I was a bit hesitant, once we sort of made that leap, I think the rest of the way, we've kind of pretty much been on par and we've both wanted to go on with the next one. And now it's like, when can we do the next one? You know, at what point is it affordable to buy the next property? And we're really excited by it.
Yeah, spot on. Well, I think, yeah. So sometimes I think probably the initial driving force. And then today will just overtake me. She'll be calling up the you know, the conveyancer. She'll be calling up the mortgage brokers. She'll be calling up Open Corp. She'll be calling up different banks trying to get a better price in the mortgage broker. So yeah, so she'll take it on. I'll be hang on for the
ride. Outstanding. So how did you, just to kind of touch on that dynamic again, because as I say, it is something where in our experience, a lot of couples, you know, they're what I call a driver and a passenger, which is perfectly cool. But in order to be successful, you at least need to be starting out, you know, from the same point and be on the same page. So back at that period of time before you bought Northcote, when you're on maternity leave, Tala, how did you kind of overcome that fear? How did you guys work through that? Because, you know, the results that you've achieved since then have been phenomenal. So however you did it, it's an interesting secret I'd like to uncover.
I think it's more just, you know, if you're good with money and you're good with your finances, like, you know, which we're both pretty on par with that. I deal with the finances in our family and all that kind of stuff, and I know the outgoings and all that. And I'm always wary of not sort of stretching ourselves and whatever, but it was more just, if we keep doing the same thing, we're not going to get further in life. We have to make some kind of a difference. And we made that leap when we were younger. Why not do it now? And yes, we lost money, but you do learn from your mistakes. And at the end of the day, you know, we're much more fearless when we're younger, and you develop those fears as you get older. But it was just sort of tapping into that a little bit and going, well, we're not really going to lose anything. If it doesn't go well, we just sell that property. It's not as though we're going to lose our house. We're not going to overextend ourselves to the point where we're going to end up losing our house. Like I said, we've always been good at managing our money. So it was sort of taking some comfort in that, yeah, we lost like 20 grand or so with the other property. But, you know, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but it's not the be all and end all. But if we can improve it, why not make that change? And we haven't looked back, and, you know, don't regret any of our decisions, even the poor decisions that we made at the beginning.
I was going to say, are you happy with how things have turned out so far?
Absolutely.
So you should be. Real credit to you. So what I'm hearing there is it's really around manage your cash flow and manage your risk. Would that be a good way to summarise it?
Yeah, that's it. Keep it simple, that's it.
Awesome. So I guess if we think about you kind of your journey and when you decided to you know, get started with Northcote, and then, you know, what we've done together since then, how do you feel that you've kind of got on that journey, and how's the what were the key factors that brought you to think about, right, well, let's partner with Open Corp and see what we can do, as opposed to, you know, going it alone? Obviously you talked about the body corp. Were there other aspects to it than that?
I think for us going with Open Corp, like once we met you guys and we knew that you were very much on the same page as us, for us it was a no-brainer. Having done it, gone out on our own, and having had all those issues that we had with the first property in Sydenham, with the build and everything. Like, I was constantly on the phone to them, and it was just a nightmare from where to go. And even with, you know, getting rentals, we had property managers changing left, right, and centre, and it was just disastrous. So when we sort of got onto OpenCorp, it was all there. We didn't have to do all of it through you guys. We could choose what we wanted to do through you guys, but it was just the convenience, you know, having 4 kids. There's not a lot of time on our hands to be doing all that extra sort of researching, and, you know, you're experts in your field.
It was stressful. We went to the Sydenham property.
Yeah.
Tonight we're on the phone, and we come home from work. So I was at the time just working in the other side of the city at the hospital. Yeah. We'd come home, and then we spend 2 hours calling up people. And it was just stressful. And then obviously, totally different environment when we come across OpenCorp. Got professionals who just took the stress out of it. There was no stress. Our first property with OpenCorp, it was the most stressless, cruisy, you know, investment we've ever done.
Like, we wish we met you guys, you know, back when we bought our first property in our 20s.
So do we, but as you said, you take lessons from what you've learned, and you know, I haven't always done everything perfectly. That's the nature of the journey, right? But do what you can when you can and learn from it. It's really good. So thinking about the positive, like, you know, as you said, married with 4 kids, how does it feel now when you look back on your journey to know what you've created and what that means for your family? How does that make you feel?
Oh, it's really exciting, and we're so over the moon that, you know, it's all through hard work. Like, Mike works hard, I work hard, and it's not because we've come to money that we've done all this. Like, we've done it all ourselves. We've lost money, we've come through it, and it's just a massive sense of achievement that this is what we've been able to do together as a team.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And are you starting to, you know, the eldest of your kids now kind of getting to an age where they might be able to start understanding some of these financial concepts? You know, the stuff that we talk about as investors is not taught at school. Have you started to share some of the insights, you know, from your investing journey with your kids, and if so, how are they kind of taking to that or not?
Even with our youngest one, all 4 of them.
Really?
Yes. They're all over it.
Yeah, they are all over it. They talk about investing in property already. They talk about when they're going to be able to get their first place, and yeah, they are all over it.
That is so cool.
Yeah, for their first Lamborghini. with assets, of course.
I've only got 2, but I can just see it now. It's going to be the OpenCorp Kids quiz, the Wadeson kids versus the McClellan kids. And it'll be like that. What's that game show where it has the Family Feud, where it has the 4 people on either side? I can see it now. Awesome. So I guess what surprised you the most on your property investing journey?
Like, in terms of positive surprise, like coming across OpenCorp and just seeing how easy it could have been if we'd done it right the first time round has been a huge surprise, I think, and it's just made life a lot easier, and we highly recommend it to anybody and everybody that listens, that, you know, it's not that difficult a process.
And you guys are fantastic. Look, you know, you've introduced family and friends to us, which we really appreciate. I guess in terms of the results that you achieved, what were the parts that we played? Obviously, you've got to bring the money and the motivation, right? They're essential parts of this process. But what were the parts that you felt we were able to fill a gap on? You know, because clearly things have gone much better for you later than what they did earlier. What were those key parts, and why did you feel that you weren't necessarily able to do those parts yourself?
I think it's just more the process where, you know, you know the areas that you sort of know where the market is at, whereas we don't really have the time to be doing that research into where to buy and what to look for. So that was a massive thing for us.
That's right. It's a full-time job in itself.
Yeah.
To work that out, and we're obviously working, you know, all day every day, just our normal work, our working life. You know, who has time to come home and research that?
Not only finding where's the right place to buy, but then finding the right house as well to buy, or the right block of land that's going to do well. Like just taking that pressure off and just doing it, and then just even then going on to the build process, you know, you just take care of all of that, and it was so smooth, and we get regular updates from Nat, and it's not as though it's like you give your money and it's all over. Like it's just that constant feedback, and I know that if I've got a question about anything, I can pick up the phone and call you or call Nat or whatever, and if you don't answer straight away, you get back to us very quickly, and you know, so just that ease of process and putting your mind at ease the whole way that you're going through just takes a lot of pressure off. And obviously with the property management as well, dealing with that, we moved our Northcote property to be managed through you guys as well again, because we were having lots of changes, and it's just seamless.
Oh, it's great to hear, Talar. Thanks for the feedback. It sounds like good teamwork. You mentioned quite a few things as we've been talking. I'd love for you to be able to, if you can, distill down what the key lessons are that both of you have learned over the journey. So not necessarily, you know, what went right versus what went wrong, but more if you're thinking about, if you're having a cup of coffee and a conversation with a potential first-time investor, what are the things that you'd try to share with them around, you know, what you've learned over your journey and what's important to be able to build a portfolio, all while having a family and working busy jobs and so on?
I think the first thing is being able to manage your money, and you know, again, you guys talk about delayed gratification a lot, but it's something that we've always done too. We don't need the best of everything now. You just make do, and you know, we have the experiences with our kids without having to spend expensive amounts of money. So it's just being able to manage your income and then your outgoings as well. Like we don't have a strict budget or anything. If there's something that we really, really want, we'd go out and do it. But we're sort of mindful that there's crap that you don't need just for the sake of saying I've got the best of whatever. So it's sort of managing your money and just educating yourself. Like financial literacy is a big thing. Listen to podcasts. Like Mike's listening to podcasts every night from various different people, not just you guys, but from various sort of different bodies. And, you know, take out the philosophies that sit with you. You don't have to agree 100% with what one person is saying to you. Like, you know, there's bits that you might agree with and bits that you might not agree with, but just arm yourself with that education first, and, you know, don't blindly jump into something because somebody else has just said to do it, especially if they haven't done it themselves. Like, listen to people, surround yourself with people that are on the same kind of journey, have the same kind of sort of life sort of plans, where they're at, and I think that's probably the main thing.
Yeah, there's one. Don't take advice from people who haven't done it before.
Right.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, and so many people say, like, you know, oh, you don't want more than one investment property because then you've got to pay your land tax every year. I'm like, and like it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter about land tax because I know in the long term I'm actually making more money from that. So that's a little bit of an outgoing. I'm not going to stick to one property because I'm worried about paying this extra fee, because it all sort of comes out in the wash with your, you know, with your tax return and all the rest of it. Like that's you've factored those costs in when you're looking at purchasing a property.
Yeah.
We get a lot of comments from a lot of our friends and family who give us probably good, honest advice, but they've got no understanding or not on the same page that we are. And so you just got to call dream crushers, dream killers, as you call it. Just got to block that out, and just back yourself. You've got your education. You know what you're doing. You got to back yourself and then move forward.
That's a real interesting point, Michael. How did you two manage to do that? Because we've all got well-meaning relatives that have got, you know, not a lot of experience, but a lot of opinions. And you guys clearly have got some focus and discipline and were able to block it out. Are there any kind of strategies or tips that you give people to be able to help with that?
Just smile and nod.
Yeah,
okay, sure. If you want to sell your property because you want to reduce your capital gain, like, you know, having to pay capital gains tax rather than hold on to it and make a crap load more money down the track with equity, then, you know, that's all. Okay. you go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Good. I struggle to smile and nod, so I'm going to take that on board.
some days it's just kind of like, oh, just grit your teeth, don't say anything. It's not worth biting.
Yeah, both Salam and I love trying to help people, especially if they've got if they're not sure where they are in their journey or they need a bit of a nudge. We'd love to give advice if they want it, especially if they ask for it. But then lots of people you give advice to, they don't want to hear what you're saying, or when they've actually heard it, they won't actually do anything, and then it's like.
I think a couple of people.
So then you work out who you're gonna focus your energy and time on as well, because otherwise you'll be helping everyone all day every day, and they're not listening to you. They're not
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah.
And I think it's just more, surrounding yourself with the right people, just ignoring those ones that, do kind of, give their strong opinions on and that they're expecting you to follow. You just need to just push that aside and just keep focused on whatever your journey is. And again, as Mike said, with, giving that education to other people, like we're very forthcoming and we love helping people out. So if they have questions, like I've spent time on the phone to people that Mike works with, going, starts talking to them about you guys, and then they'll be like, oh, talk to Claire because she does most of the dealings or whatever. So I'll end up talking to them and just going through the processes. And some go ahead and make contact, and others like, oh, I'm not really sure, I'm a bit hesitant. And with those ones, you're kind of like, well, they'll make their decisions whenever it happens. But there are some people that that they want to, but they're just a bit hesitant. So we kind of stay on them a little bit more, going, you won't regret this. Get on it. And they have a look back and they're like, oh, I wish I did it, 4 or 5 years ago when you first told me about it. And I guess it's because we've done it a few times now. We've got the 3 properties now. And because we've done it, people can see, okay, hang on, these guys know what they're saying. They've done it multiple times. It's not as though it was the first one that happened by fluke.
Yeah, awesome. So I think I might know what your answer will be to at least part of the next question. What have been the best parts about your property investing journey? It clearly sounds like imparting knowledge and helping others as part of that, based on what you've learned. Anything else?
Easy answer. That's got to be the Open Corp Christmas days. Unbeatable. They're really good.
It's so easy to please, mate.
No, well, obviously, sort of building our portfolio and heading towards that sort of financial freedom. Like I said, we don't want to be working until we're 60, 70 years old. Sort of being on that path to being able to retire early and passing on that knowledge to our kids as well. Like I said, even with our youngest, who's 8, we, for the last couple of years, have openly spoken to all of our kids about the journey and property investing, and we talk about money and finances all the time with them. So it's just imparting that knowledge to our kids, knowing that they're going to start off from a better baseline than what we had. We had to research and learn all of that stuff ourselves, but being able to pass on that knowledge not only to our kids, but also helping friends and family out to, take that step to improve their lives as well.
Awesome. One thing I know that, if we're talking about kind of old school mindsets, around, debt is bad and you've got to pay things off as quickly as possible. That was obviously a mindset that you started with, and then that mindset has shifted over your journey as you've gone. I guess what were the light bulb moments there that helped you shift that thinking from kind of how we were always taught to think about money and loans and debt, as opposed to how you think about it now?
I think it's just sort of learning that there's good debt and there's bad debt. Obviously, credit debt and all that kind of stuff is bad debt, but when you're investing in property, using someone else's money to make your fortunes is a better way of going about it, rather than, you're never going to be able to save the money to be able to buy a property outrightly. We don't come from that money, so you have to do it a different kind of way. So it's sort of realising that it's okay to have that debt, because you sort of, your tax return helps out with that as well. But we're sort of not into the negatively gearing kind of things. We don't sort of bang on about, negatively gearing is the best way to go, or positively gearing is the best way to go. It's just sort of making that process that it's okay to be in some kind of debt as long as we know that we can manage it. And I guess when we look towards buying our next property, it's just focusing on if we want to increase our portfolio and help us sort of further along, we need to get into some kind of debt, and that's okay. And it's just being comfortable with that debt, and just knowing also that because we do have a few properties, if anything does happen and we just can't keep it, you just sell it. It's not the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, ideally you want to hold on to property, but if things go that sour, there's always that option. You know, we're always going to have the roof over our head. We're not going to lose that.
Yeah, really, really good point. So, look, I've loved the insights, guys, around manage your cash flow, mitigate your risk, be informed, don't overstretch yourself, think about the big picture and what it can create. Don't get kind of lost in the details and block out the negativity. Fantastic stuff. What advice would you give if you were sitting down having one of these conversations that you have with someone who's thinking about getting started? What advice would you try to impart?
Do your research, educate. If you've saved the money and you're good, you know that you're good with money and you've saved the money to do it, don't be afraid to take that leap. If you want to go out and do it on your own, fine. But if you're hesitant about that, go through a company that, like I said, we've recommended OpenCorp to so many people because we believe in the system. We before even getting onto OpenCorp, we've spoken to other companies too, and the philosophies didn't quite sit well with us. But OpenCorp, different philosophies suit different people. So do your research. If you don't want to be going the property line by yourself, go through a company. Talk to people, have them come out to the house and, talk to, I don't know, COVID days, I can't come out to your house at the moment, but, pick up the phone, talk to people about it, get some information, see if philosophies sit well with you as well, and don't be afraid to take that leap.
Do it.
If you minimise the risks as much as possible, which you guys obviously help with doing all that kind of stuff as well in the process, just go for it. Take the leap of faith.
I think it's a really good point, isn't it? So, I was a first-time investor once myself. I was nervous and anxious, but it's why I was asking you about it that was exactly what I did. I'm like, well, I'm 20, back when I was 25, I'm like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen here? And if you're taking a long-term view and the property's not overstretching you, then, I look back on a daily basis as I'm talking to all of our clients and potential investors around their situation. I think about it often. It's like, well, if I didn't take that first step, everything else wouldn't have happened either. And it's the obvious cliches like riding a bike. It's really hard to get it right the first time, but once it kind of clicks, it's a lot easier. But I think what you've been able to share tonight are some fantastic insights around your experience, where it hasn't all been a bed of roses. There have been some speed ups, and I really appreciate your honesty in sharing that with people because, it's open and it's transparent and it helps them understand that, not everyone's journey's been great from the start, but with the right mindset, the right cash flow management and focusing on the right things, it's amazing what you can create. And you guys are living examples of that, and what you're creating for your family. It's a credit to you, and we're rapt to be on the journey with you. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your very busy lives to share your insights with our viewers. So, Talara and Michael, thank you very much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Wasn't that fantastic? Some great insights there from Talara and Michael about their investing journey. Thank you in advance to everyone who registered and has sent through some questions for us to ask Simon and Sharon and Michael and Talar. Some fantastic questions that really get to the heart of, I guess, not only their investment journey, but also investing in general. So let's go to those questions now.
The first question is from Lisa, and she wants to know, as a couple, was one of you more driven than the other, and how did you deal with it?
Yes. I would say Simon was probably across the detail before I was, and was certainly driving the discussion, and was probably sold on that it was the right way forward before I was. And I guess how we dealt with that was he just had to leave me alone for a little while and let me give me some time to catch up and get understand it in my own way. And it meant that Boz and I had some time, some one-on-one time as well, where I got to talk to Boz without Simon, involved with himself in the conversation, so that I could get it and sort of be equally comfortable to proceed.
There was actually there was a point where you said, "Oh, look, this is your thing. You just do it," because you couldn't make the first time I caught up with Boz, and I said, "Well, hold on, this is a joint thing. It's quite a big investment. Boz wants to meet with you and run you through the same thing," and you were like, "Oh, I don't just want it to be some tokenistic discussion if we've already made a decision." I'm like, "Well, we haven't, and you're part of this. Your name's on the contract, so it's not tokenistic. It's like you probably should sit down." So I think we really made the right choice there.
Yeah, great answer. There's another question from Paul, and he wants to know how important is it to have the correct team around you when investing in property?
Very important would be my response to that. I think you need to trust the team around you and know that they're doing all the right stuff and that you're in good hands. I think that trust piece is really important from my perspective.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Otherwise, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, am I buying a property in the wrong place? Am I making a financial decision that's in the best interests of the company I'm working with, as opposed to in the best interests of us? I think that's what trust is all about, really, in this game, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Daniel wants to know if you have any suggestions for cutting through the market hype and the media.
Don't listen to it. If it's creating conflict, I think you need to, or certainly my view is, you need to decide what you listen to and what is your source of truth. And the media may not be that. So yeah, maybe decide what it is that you listen to or don't listen to.
Yeah, and think long game, because media is only ever short term. You never read an article saying what's the 10-year trend going to be. Well, you might do, but not many. It's always like in the next 3 months or in the next 2 years at most. But if you're on a 10-year investment journey or a 20+ year, I don't read too many articles saying that's going south.
All right. The first question is from Robert, and he would like to know, if you could do it all again, what would you do differently?
Well,
Powerball.
Back from the early 20s with that mistake we made, don't buy property from door-to-door salesmen. That would be the only thing that I wouldn't do. But in terms of the open court process,
buy and hold. That's our philosophy now. Is obviously buy and hold. The best. We ask the kids, what's the best time frame to hold property, and they'll say forever. Like I've taught them well.
So buying and holding property. But in terms of the open corp journey, there's absolutely nothing that I'd change. I've loved every minute with it.
Get on to open corp earlier.
We're on a good thing. We're on a good thing, and we'll keep on it.
Well, I guess that sort of answers the next question, because Brendan asked if you would make your next investment with OpenCorp, or if you feel you know enough to do it on your own.
We would definitely 100% go through OpenCorp.
Yeah, just because we probably, to be honest, we probably could do it ourselves, but for the as I said, for the ease, for the ease and the
save the stress and
heartache, we just the OpenCorp, they're the experts. Let them do what they do.
We've got the financial knowledge and all that kind of stuff to do it on our own, but it's just finding the right property and all that.
And dealing things interstate as well. We're buying property interstate. It's not that easy to hook up with a builder and make sure he's doing his compliance checks and things. It's just we're OpenCorp and just take care of everything.
Just for the ease of it. The fee is well worth it.
All right. One last one. David is interested to know if you had any input into which areas you invest in through OpenCorp.
Well, I think there's some
Yeah,
some
so
suggestions.
with the first, like, we were presented with a couple of properties, and we chose where to go. The second time around, it was sort of more on a recommendation, and having done the process before through you guys, we had full faith in it, and it's worked out really well for us. So we're happy to Queensland.
So that's right. So that was our first interstate property, and just 10 years ago I wouldn't have dreamed of buying a place,
Even at the time, we actually
20
first
years ago I
presented
would have
us
done.
with
Because
Queensland.
probably parents would be going, no, you had your mum and dad in your ear going,
Don't
give
buy
the white
interstate.
noise, that's it.
But I sort of bought into that a bit. I
Yeah.
didn't think that I'd buy interstate. I was looking at Melbourne again. You presented with Queensland, and we're like, oh, if that's what you're presenting, sure, let's go for it. And it's worked out really well.
And now we look at the figures every day people moving from Melbourne to Queensland, we're like, well.
Cha-ching.
Rita would like to know, what are the tax benefits of owning a property portfolio?
Great question. So the tax benefits that come with holding investment portfolio can vary depending on the type of property that you buy. So very simply put, all of the costs that you spend on an investment property are tax deductible, except the stamp duty on the purchase, the solicitor's fees, to do the conveyancing as well. Pretty much anything else can be claimed. Okay. Now, where certain types of property can be more advantageous to maximise your tax benefits is around new property as opposed to established property, and that comes down to something called depreciation. Depreciation is what I call the money for jam, because depreciation is the drop in the building value. And you can claim that as a tax deduction, but it doesn't cost you anything before you claim it. So loan interest, for example, you have to pay the interest on a monthly basis before you can then get a tax deduction on it. Depreciation are additional tax deductions just by being smart about what you invest in. So absolutely, maximising tax benefits is a really smart way to be able to minimise your holding costs and ensure that the properties you're investing in pay for themselves from day one. That just allows you to be able to hold more properties in your portfolio and take advantage of the power of compound growth. If you don't know what compound growth is, get in touch with our team and they'll arrange for someone to take you through it, because that's something that only 1% of the Australian population understand. It's also the reason why 90% of the Australian population are unfortunately retiring on the pension.
Perfect. Alexander would like to know if there's something he can do if he has 200k worth of equity.
Hey, great question, Alexander. So absolutely, well done on what you've done so far, and obviously creating equity in your portfolio, which is great. That equity is money that you can access to be able to then cover the deposit and costs for another property in your portfolio. So you don't have to save up a whole nother deposit if you want to get another property. You can tap into that available equity. 250,000 is ample, and you can use that equity to cover the deposit and costs on another property and still borrow the balance from the bank. So the power of it is that you are effectively using no money down, and because of the rent and the tax benefits that next property would bring in for you, that wouldn't cost you anything to hold either. So it's important to remember that if you have your own home, having an investment property or multiple investment properties is not the same as having 2 or 3 or 4 mortgages, because on your own home, you're covering all the holding costs out of your own pocket. On the investment properties, each property gives you a $30,000 to $35,000 pay rise in the form of rental income and tax benefits to cover all the holding costs.
Great. Clara would like to know, what would be your advice for people on how to start when they have no serviceability to borrow?
Great question, Clara. So I first came across investing 2 years before I was able to start as well. What I would definitely recommend is, as Talara and Michael were talking about, educate yourself and get absorbed in information, learn from people that have done it themselves. to be able to, be informed on how you can take advantage of any opportunities out there. So as soon as you're able, from a financial perspective, to be able to move forward, you're well positioned to take advantage from day one. So definitely educate and learn from people that have done it themselves. Thirdly, also understand what's required to be able to get borrowing capacity to move forward. You might be in a situation where I've had clients that have walked into the boss's office and asked for pay rises the next morning and got it just by asking, because they knew what income they needed to be able to get borrowing capacity for another property. I've had clients talk to their parents about, effectively going guarantor or gifting them some of the equity in their parents' home to get started on their investment journey as well. So thinking outside the box, and we can definitely give you some direction on that, share some strategies with you to consider that may or may not be relevant to your individual situation on how you can get started that bit sooner. I know that definitely helped me, and we've had numerous clients that it's helped to do the same.
Perfect. Sarah would like to know if it's best to purchase one property first and then wait a few years and purchase another, or to purchase two lower valued properties now.
Great question, Sarah. So conceptually, it's better to buy two lower priced properties because you're getting, you've got 2 lots of rent, you've got 2 lots of tax benefits, and you've got lower holding costs. That comes with the caveat that you need to make sure that the properties that you're investing in are good quality. So for example, I'm talking about 2 properties at say 600,000 compared to one at 1.2 million, as opposed to I wouldn't be buying 2 $300,000 properties just because they're cheap if you've got a $600,000 borrowing capacity. So you need to make sure that the quality is there, that the cash flow is there, that you're minimizing your risk, that you're attracting quality tenants. Because a $350,000 property can just be an expensive lemon. You need to make sure that it's fit for purpose and always going to be bringing in the rent with quality tenants and low cost to hold in a location that's going to grow in value to allow you to be able to repeat the process over time. So yeah, it definitely makes sense to have more affordable properties in the portfolio as opposed to fewer expensive ones. Just make sure that the properties that you're buying are the right quality and not too cheap where you run into problems.
Great answer. One last question from Vicky. She would like to know if you would recommend saving a 20% deposit or saving less of a deposit and having an LMI.
The barefoot investor is going to hate me, Vicky, but we recommend the opposite. So I've paid LMI on 80% of my investment portfolio, and LMI for investment is some of the best money that you'll ever spend in my opinion. The reason being, it all comes down to how you can maximize the performance of the portfolio. Now, if you have 4 properties growing in value, you're going to get a much better result than if you have 2 properties growing in value. Okay, so a little bit of LMI spent on investment properties. The LMI is tax deductible for investments, whereas it's not for your own home. So I can understand avoiding LMI on your own house. But as far as investments are concerned, you're definitely going to make more by having that second property grow in value than what you are waiting to be able to accumulate a 20% deposit just to avoid some lender's mortgage insurance. So there we go. Some amazing insights from Simon and Sharon, Talara and Michael, and some great questions from those who registered for the webinar. We really hope you've enjoyed these insights and got some valuable learnings based on real life experiences from OpenCorp property investors. There's nothing special about Simon and Sharon nor Talara and Michael, but what is consistent about their journey is that they were clear about what they wanted to achieve, and they were clear on the fact that they wanted to improve their financial situation. OpenCorp was able to help based on our experience and the recipe, the formula that we have to deliver successful investment outcomes every time for our clients. So the best place to start, if you're looking at these interviews thinking that you might be like Simon and Sharon, super time poor, want to improve your situation, don't understand property markets, or are looking around the corner from where you live, then you can get in touch with us. You might be like Talara and Michael. You've tried to do things yourself, haven't gone as well as what you'd hoped, but you haven't lost all faith and you want to improve your financial situation for the future and maybe set up your family as well, then absolutely get in touch. Two things that we are very proud of here at OpenCorp is our track record, where after we made a submission to ASIC, it was verified that we'd beaten the market by 37% based on all the properties that we'd sourced for clients over a prior 10-year period. Not only that, just like Simon and Sharon, Talara and Michael, over 50% of our business each year is repeat clientele and referral business, where our clients have told their network about who we are and what we do and shared their stories to be able to help those close to them achieve some of the fantastic results that they've been able to achieve themselves. So if you can see yourselves in Simon and Sharon and Talara and Michael, or you want to know more about your individual situation, given that we can only share general information in these webinars, please opt in for a wealth creation consultation with one of my team. These sessions are normally valued at $395. For webinar attendees, we're waiving that, okay? But it's a great opportunity for you and your partner, if applicable, to come together and understand more about what our investment strategy is. We need to learn from you what it is that you want to achieve, and you can learn from us how we've gone about getting the results that we have, what our investment strategy is, learn more about compound growth and how we've been able to help our clients to get the results that they've achieved over time. Most importantly, how we can do all of the heavy lifting for you, how we can de-risk it, how we can make sure that these investments are not impacting your lifestyle. So click below for the wealth creation consultation. We look forward to hearing from you soon, and thanks for joining us for our September webinar.